My name is, sorry.
Um,
Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and let Sophie start and then she'll let me take over when she's done.
Aloha and welcome to the 10th annual iTeach808 Empowering Hawaii's Teachers in Technology Conference, sponsored by the Augustine Educational Foundation and Sacred Hearts Academy, Honolulu. My name is Sophie Chang, and I'll be facilitating this session. We're so honored to have Baird joining us today to share her expertise through a 90-minute presentation named 10 Ways to Use a 3D Doodle Pen. Please be aware that we'll be recording this session. If you don't like being recorded, you may consider turning off your camera during the session. The recording will be made available on YouTube and shared on iTeach808's website a week after this event. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ty.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on Saturday. I really appreciate you coming on a Saturday morning. I know that's asking a lot. And as teachers, we don't have much free time. I did want to share with all of you that you are lucky recipients of a $5 Starbucks gift card for joining my presentation on Saturday morning. So in order to receive that, I will just need your work address to mail it to you. I can't, unfortunately, do email with that. Starbucks is kind enough to donate these to me for my presentation. So if you don't mind putting your work address to earn that, that would be fantastic. At the end or towards the end of the presentation, I will have another surprise that I'd like to share. Without further explanation, my name is Ty Baird. I'm here to present 10 ways to use a 3D Doodle pen in your classroom and maybe for other opportunities like after school clubs. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with the slides. Let's see here. First, I always like to know about the person presenting. So again, my name is Ty. I'm a special education teacher on the island of Maui. I've been teaching for 14 years. I've graduated from St. Mary's College in Indiana and the University of Notre Dame. And if you have any questions about my presentation or about things that I've shared, you can always contact me at my school email address. I'm more than happy to answer questions or to provide further resources if we don't have time today. And so before I show you my demonstration and talk further, I want to explain what the 3D Doodle pen is. So this is a device that looks very much like a pen, but instead of using ink, it uses filament. It designs, it creates, it functions just like a pen. It's much fatter, much larger. There's other explanations that go with that, but these are the words and the innovative explanation that the website that I purchased 3D pens from states and wants you to know. It's an incredible tool for your classroom. It's a new discovery. It's a new way to reach children who learn differently or need more. It's an alternative way of demonstrating student growth. And I put the exclamation points in the question after the word assessment because apparently that is up for debate. However, I have found ways to use it in my classroom with my students for assessment after teaching a lesson. The 3D pen comes in 3 different models. There are various websites that sell them. Amazon Prime and Amazon.com, if you don't have Prime, also offer different prices. They do not necessarily offer the same things I've listed on my slide here of the ages and which pen might be best for your grade level or your age group that you're working with. But in general, the start pen is for students maybe at the end or the beginning of kindergarten, depending on how advanced your students are. It runs from about $50 to $200 if you're going to get a really super advanced one. However, I have not seen any high school classrooms use the Pro unless it's enrichment and it's maybe for a student doing an internship. The one that I know of right now is Maui Jim. Maui Jim had a high school senior from one of our complex area high schools who had an internship in the summer, and he used the Pro pen to create a model of a different pair of glasses. So that's a career and college readiness, but that student also had demonstrated that he could handle using it and he could also use it for a career. So they took his skills and his gifts and applied it. My students have been using the 3D Doodler Start and also the 3D Doodler Create. So it's really up to you how you feel as a teacher and what you feel your students advance with. That's really your call. I would like to share as well, my next slide here, these 10 reasons to investigate and discover. So some of these that I've listed out are comments or quotes from my students or quotes from other adults. I find them very, very interesting, very engaging, very inspiring. Yes, we know that the pen comes in 3 different models, along with 3 different prices. We also know that it meets standards in every grade level. I want to talk about that so that we all understand that. At the preschool level, I've seen it used for letters, numbers, shapes, geometry, algebra, designing let's see, how would I explain this? A way for a teacher or another adult to come in and get to know a student, so rapport. Some of the examples I will show later in the presentation are students exploring what the pen can do, but also what the student did with it in having the teacher get to know something about them. So it would be a great tool to use at the beginning of the year. The elementary and early childhood K through 2 level, I've had teachers say that they've had students of all levels and all abilities use it for writing their name, practicing letters, tracing numbers and letters, shapes again, mathematical building, inquiry-based learning with bugs, animals, insects, dogs, cats. Also, students who don't like pencils, the traditional pencil or the pen, but would still complete an assignment using the 3D Doodler. So that was pretty interesting when I had heard that from another teacher. At the middle school level, I've seen it used for geometry, for art. I've seen it also used for mixed media lessons. Teachers have become very, very creative. And it's amazing what we can see in our students when we believe in their potential and we believe in providing them with a resource that maybe others think that they can't demonstrate knowledge with or can't demonstrate a skill with or a concept with. So I believe in this device. At the high school level, I've seen it with physics, chemistry, and math as well. To be more specific, why should we use them? Why are they so great? Well, this is an affordable tool versus a 3D printer. I've heard of teachers who have said that this is a way for their students to have arguably the same thing, or if not just about, and it's mobile, and they're comparing it to a 3D printer. So they're saying, we can't afford this amazing $1,500 3D printer, but we can afford a 3D pen, or we can afford a 3D pen set, and then we can use them throughout the school instead of having one main printer that we have to wait for. So students are able to quickly design something that does the similar thing than a 3D printer. It also allows for illustration in 3D concepts in math, art, science. My favorite is geometry. I've seen atomic molecules built. I've seen spatial orientation explained further with a project or in front of a classroom, where maybe the student who had not had the opportunity to be able to present now has a project, and he or she is so proud of it that they are able to explain their project and the concept that was taught. Symmetry, lots of examples of geometry, drawing a line of symmetry or drawing a shape, drawing a line of symmetry on the shape. I've also seen students share sorry about that, let me go back. I've seen students share characters, drawing characters from a book. So that's really involved in it. It's also a tangible means to explore a complex idea. I have a student this year who is severely autistic, and he cannot necessarily explain things in complete sentences. But when he has this project made with a 3D pen, he's able to get up in front of his peers and he's able to show what he's done. And so it allows him I guess the ability to have had the playing field leveled where he's able to say, hey, I understood what the teacher said, and I understood what my assignment was, and I understood how to work with my group. I also understood how to design and how to work with others in my project. It's an excellent support, almost a superior support for problem solving and critical thinking exercises. Students are able to work together while using the pen. It promotes careers in architecture, jewelry making, design, graphic design, with prototyping in mind. We talk a lot in the Department of Education and public schools about how we need to see our kids grow in a way where they can apply this for career and college readiness. Our students struggle with that, I feel like, at times because they don't have the tools, or maybe are not being given those tools with that teacher teaching, or maybe a school doesn't have them. So that's a really neat, exciting opportunity that I think that we can use 3D pen to say, no, like this is a way to do that. It's creative, it's innovative, and it's empowering for our students. Student creations, students tell me that it's something that you can share about yourself with what you create. I like the quotes that are on 6 and 7 on this slide. It's a way cool idea for our school makerspace. This little tool, this little pen idea started the academic coach at my school to start building a makerspace. So students come in the morning or they come after school and they want to start creating something that they've learned during the school day, or they've learned about during the school day, to make that and design that in the makerspace from 7 to 7:30, either before or after they've eaten breakfast. They come in, they grab a pen from the pouch, which I'll explain later, and then they get started on doing something with whatever they're making. So they're carrying on their learning. So that's another exciting piece, is that it might seem like they're playing, but they're also designing and they're also creating. And if we remember anything from Steve Jobs, he designed the Apple phone so that you and I would learn how to play with a device, and that's how we would figure it out, which I think is really interesting, because it's quite possible that you could provide this pen with your students and they would already know what to do. Even though I'm going to show you what to do today, they would already understand how to use it. I also think that it is possible that we can look at some STEM careers with what this pen allows our students to do. Lots of science, lots of math, lots of opportunities to explain that I too can learn. And when we talk about special education, since I'm a special education teacher, our students are able to do things with the 3D pen that they would not be able to do otherwise. Locomotor moves are big. Learning to like the pencil or the pen with the idea of a 3D pen or a 3D model pen. It's also a great incentive. So I know I'm going beyond 10 reasons, but these are some of the top ones when I did a survey of our staff. I think it's really also a non-scary tool. It's not frightening. Teachers pick it up and they really like what it looks like. They like how it's like the Apple phone. It's intriguing. I want to see what that does. So I find those to be very, very exciting and helpful, and reasons why we should all try them. If I move on to positive feedback from students and adults, the pros, the positives from students and adults, it's an amazing, engaging device. I have yet to hear that children or adults don't like the actual device. Children really love it. You can use it in many ways, as I've stated before. For some teachers, this is an affordable option that they might consider utilizing instead of that 3D printer, or they might consider purchasing for themselves. They are able to promote so much beyond the classroom walls. So I talked earlier about that high school senior who had an internship with Maui Jim, designing a pair of sunglasses. It can also go further into social and emotional wellness, where he's doing something that helps people see better. So it can also add to that as well. It opens mind and doors, and you name it, as one of my colleagues said, you can find a way to use that. And it's exciting. We have so much that is considered book work, I feel like, or worksheets in the DOE and in education, that I feel like we're always constantly looking for other alternatives as teachers to benefit our students and allow our students the opportunity to be creative and innovative, that also don't cost us an arm and a leg. There are, I don't want to call them negatives, because I don't like that word. I say cons, or I say areas of refinement for the pen, or maybe it's the concept of having a device or something that is in high demand. We have that the noise can sometimes be irritating for the pro style pen. It's hard, I think, for other students to focus if that's going on. The alternative to that is that when we do centers in my classroom, I have those students who are bothered by that put on noise canceling headphones or not be so close to the noise. We also have that it can be hard to transition children out of this tool once they get going. My one student who has ADHD is so focused when he's using this pen that it is challenging when we as teachers, or myself or the general education teacher or his OT comes to provide services and he has to move on. It can be a very, very difficult thing because he doesn't want to stop. So it focuses him, but it's hard to get him to move on to something else. So I would say you'd have to find another activity before or after that to help the student move towards that, or be comfortable where you're stopping on that. For some teachers, they don't like that it compares to suggestions. They don't like that you are comparing the pen to the 3D printer. It doesn't do the same thing to them or for them. I think it does, so I'm biased, but I like that you can take the pen from classroom to classroom. So that's where I'm sharing my opinion with that, but I understand what they're saying, that it doesn't always provide them with what they would like to see versus a 3D printer. And those comments are coming from teachers who maybe are more experienced with 3D printers and maybe at the middle school or high school level. Filament that is like your ink, I'm going to show you right now, is like it comes in all different colors, but these things are expensive when you use them up, you're only getting a certain amount in your class pack or with the pen that you've bought. It can become expensive, and whether or not your school or whoever is purchasing it has a budget to be able to continue to afford it can also be an area of refinement, or, as one of my colleagues says, an area or a need that you want to fill, just like the ink in a printer. You want to try to have all your resources and all of what you need before you get started, or before you run out of other supports for it. So the other thing too is when you get really excited with design in that, it starts to add up, because kids start looking online and they see ideas that are in books in different colors. So they come in neon, they come in skin tones, so you could do a portrait. Because kids become really creative and innovative with this device, it then becomes very, very costly. So that's just to keep in mind, and maybe the solution to that also is that you use it in ways to where they can explore it ahead of time without it being so expensive. There's multiple ways, which I'll talk about later, that show how to make it affordable for yourself. I have some ideas that my colleagues had written down when I presented to our staff. So they were so passionate about this that they wanted people to use it. So I said, okay, I'll take those notes. How do you get them? So a 3D pen can be bought in many different ways, or you can earn one in many different ways. You can present it to your school for possible tech funded projects. I know 3 teachers who've already done that. Their principals were really on board. 2 of them wrote a proposal for class sets. So those are about $600, I believe, a piece. And I believe you get 12 in each set. They were able to get 2 sets. So their school bought those. And then what their idea was is that they were going to share it among their grade level and then expand it out to their school. So they decided that that way they would use it wisely. So you could present it to your school for possible tech funded projects. You could pay for it yourself, which I hate to tell teachers to do because I know we don't have any extra money, but there is that alternative as well. If you bought one for yourself and you explored with yourself and thought maybe that your students could benefit from this, you too could use that in your classroom. And that would be very, very useful. With that said as well, if it's broken or if damage happens, you then are just out your pen, not your schools. Grants for technology on the internet is another one. There's a technology company and a technology fund in the state of Georgia that looks on donorschoose.com specifically, but when I contacted them and they funded some of our pens at our school, they are constantly looking for ways to pretty much throw money out at teachers. And that would be amazing if we could give them the opportunity to fund your project. They like to see kids and students who are innovative at all different ages. They think that that is so exciting and so phenomenal that we work so hard as teachers. And they really also don't know that we are so underfunded. So the way that I found all this out is they were constantly funding a lot of my tech projects in my classroom. So I find that really interesting. I will have to research their address and their contact for you if anybody is interested in that, but they are super, super generous and super willing to work with you as well. Donorschoose.org is really kind to schools. I know at the beginning of the year, they were giving lots and lots of projects, funding from Hawaii specifically. They funded 3 of our teachers' projects for pens. So we have 3 teachers who have class sets that are strictly to their classroom. There's a 4th grade class that has some, there's a 2nd grade class that has one, and I believe a 5th grade class also that have one at our school. The website that I shop with or that I choose to purchase from is right here on the screen. It's the 3ddoodler.com. I feel like they are the best with the ones that are out there because their customer service is really, really awesome. It's really amazing. They pick up the phone when you call and have a question. They have live chat. They are helpful in ways that maybe you would not necessarily think. They can offer you many, many, many suggestions and ways to amp up your lessons. They can also offer ways to encourage your students to build on what they have already contributed to. They have contests, which are really fun for enrichment for students. They have ways to get students excited. They also provide you with the right description of the right pen for your students. So maybe if you have a general education class like myself, which also has special ed students in it, so it's an inclusion classroom, you might want different pens for different students. You might have a concern because the pen heats up. They might tell you what to do, what not to do. They're very, very helpful. They also are a little bit more expensive than Amazon, but they are really good with their resources. They also guide you with I mentioned I would talk about this later, which is right now. They also have accessories for your students so that if you have students who are disorganized or teachers who are disorganized or people coming in and out of your classroom, volunteers, they provide you with resources that keep the pens organized. So they have pouches, they have opportunities for students to have extra chargers that you can purchase. They have stencils for students to trace their pen, to use their pen with. They have certain types of paper recommendations. They have so much that's out there, and they also have a blog. So if you wanted to post what you did in your classroom, or if you wanted to show students and families what you're doing, they also really seek to provide you that forum, which I think is what educators often also crave. They really offer you opportunities to use their tool. So I find that very helpful and very, very neat that we have a company that seeks to promote their device in our classrooms, but also help us use it. It does meet standards as well. And I believe on their website, they have a section, although when I'm looking at my notes, I can't remember where I wrote it down. It's under their website where you can find a lesson and then you can find the standards that match it. So maybe your preschool standard is not the same, obviously, as your high school standard. Ideas, though, that are just amazing for what our students are able to do. Another opportunity for us as educators to learn. My demonstration, before I go to that, I'm going to kind of talk about my student work samples. These are two students of mine. One is a fourth grader. The other one, I'm sorry, these are both fourth graders. Now they're fifth graders. They both have their glasses on that they've made. We were doing an art lesson on a book by Kevin Hanks, I think is how you say his last name. And we were learning about seeing and glasses and the right glasses to wear. And the student on my left, super embarrassed, didn't want to wear his glasses for half the school year. When I took out the 3D pens, all of a sudden he sees his friend next to him in the other picture building and making glasses that aren't just glasses, but these are glasses that make him super cool. So he sees that and he decides that that is something that he wants to make. The most amazing thing about this lesson in doing this is something that they created and worked on for about 3 or 4 days, coming in and out of my classroom in their gen ed room. And then I see him wearing his glasses every day. So I find that also is really neat. The collaboration that the 3D pen promoted, as well as the emotional safety that it gave my students, really neat, really exceptional, because this student also is experiencing a really rough home life and verbal abuse. So to be able to find himself in creation and innovation, and then his grades go up, and his gen ed teacher is talking about how he can now talk about why it's important to wear his glasses and how he might carry that attitude on to other students who struggle with another issue in class. So I just kind of think about those students as how neat that is that we can promote that. The one student's work on the left, Nakoa is his name. That's what he worked on creating. Playing around with the ink or the filament, we should say, on his presentation, and first tracing his name and then being able to sit down and work on his idea of his project. And then, what's also neat about Nakoa is Nakoa wants to someday design billboards at Disneyland. So his idea was that he wanted to use the 3D pen to create his name, to then carry that on to being able to promote himself in graphic design for billboards. So that's really neat how he can apply something he wants to do later in life with the concept of his name. The student on I'm sorry, the student on the right with the line segment, that was from our geometry lesson, learning geometric elements. We did a dot, we did a polygon, we also did symmetry, but the one example that she felt she accomplished well was for line segment. So that was a project or a piece that she had in addition to other geometric elements, but that's the one that she's proud of that she wanted me to share. Let's see. That is the end of my slideshow. I'm just going to go back to, I should stop and just say, does anybody have any questions right now before I start with my demonstration?
On the website, you mentioned that there's student contests. What kind
Yes.
can you describe that?
Yes. So last year they had a contest that is similar to one of our contests here with Choose Love, with the Choose Love movement. They took a, I forget what they used as the design, but they took something that we then used as, we did a shaka, and we asked the students to create their own shaka, and they had that listed with their website. Now it may have closed last year because that was one from last year, but I will also do some research in getting more information for you as well if you would like that.
Thank you.
Yes, no
And
problem.
then when people purchase the colors, do you purchase each color individually or does it come in sets?
It does, good question. Thank you for asking. It does come in sets. You don't just get one color unless you want to purchase one color. I know I bought a lot of black at one point just because the students, we were studying the Iditarod, and a lot of the dog fur when they wanted to create their dogs was that they needed black. So I know that I had to order more black, but every color you're going to get in your class set, you're going to get almost the rainbow. And then for some reason, and I don't know that I figured it out yet, but for some reason, the colors that show up best are the darker ones, but it also depends on the paper that you use or the background that you're going to use. I have found that cardboard or the foam board from Home Depot, who also is really kind to donate paper or foam board too, by the way, they will only show up on certain backgrounds better. So then your students can't really see it if it's like a thin yellow or if it's like this cayenne looking turquoise color, but you do not have to purchase them by itself unless you want to. With the class sets, they send you like so much. They send you almost two, I equate it to like, if you know See's Candy, the way they have their chocolate set up, they're sending you a lot of filament. So it's hard to run out, but they're sending you a lot. If you buy a class set, you can also purchase the class set, the filament separate, but you do not have to buy the filament separate if you don't want to. Hopefully that answers that.
Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions before I show? So okay, let me go back to my demonstration so that I can show you kind of what, just wanted to show you really quick before I go to this. This was the dog that my one student had made down here. He created that for two reasons. He wanted to show me something that he really loved. So he loves dogs and he loves his dog. His dog is a Dalmatian. I think that's a pretty good design for a fourth grader who doesn't really excel academically, but when it comes to design and innovative projects, that's what he was able to make. Before I start using the pen and showing you, I do want to show you what each 3D pen comes with so that you can see. So if you buy them individually, you're going to get a pen that looks like this. I put star stickers on all of mine so that I can tell those belong to me or those belong to my class, but that's up to you. I know some teachers take a paint pen that's permanent, and they write their classroom number on it, or they write their name. In addition, you'll see that it's teal, so it's pretty hard to misplace if you have them in a row, and if you have a surge protector where they're all plugged in. If you teach your students right or teach them well, they learn the concepts of plugging it back in, turning it on, turning it off, doing the right things with respect for technology. Every year, I always have students, regardless of their ability, I have them sign a 3D pen contract so that they're taking care of what they use. I don't want to have to buy more technology because someone abused it or because I didn't teach respect for it correctly. So I have them sign their contract, and then I don't necessarily always have the parents sign it because I feel like we need to give our students more incentive and more responsibility that it's your pen, you're using it for that time being, you treat it with respect. So this is the pen. When you look at the pen, you have a spot right here where you're going to plug in your charger that comes with it. Every pen comes with its own charger. So that's another way that students can learn to be responsible. They have the opportunity to plug the charger back into the pen and then plug the pen back into the wall, which the surge protector's in, or vice versa. I then have the students, you're going to turn the pen to this side so that your orange is your button where they're going to be able to put their fingers like this. So they're going to have their finger or maybe their thumb, if they're more comfortable, on it, so that when they turn the pen on, they can put it to the paper. Some students, for whatever reason, like to hold the pen above the paper and watch the filament or the pen turn on the bottom, which doesn't really do what you want them to do with it. So you have to tell them that it's okay to put the pen to the paper or put the pen to the cardboard or whatever it is that you're working on. So once you turn it on, you're going to see a red light. Your red light is telling you or the student that it is warming up or ready to go. It takes maybe 30 seconds to get going. Nothing is going to happen if you have your light like this and you're just kind of watching it. I usually have the same student who's my technology coordinator for our iPads and our computers also be responsible for the pens. So then you're going to see your light turn green. You're going to put whatever color filament you've decided to use. So I'm going to use red today. So I'm going to teach my students to put the filament inside this part of it so that it will stick out until it's being used. And then you're going to slowly turn. I have yellow paper today so that you can see what goes on. I'm going to have my students first play with the pen or use it for fun. And then I'm going to teach my lesson, or then I'm going to get more strict with my responsibilities for what I expect for them out of what's going to go on with our lesson for the day. Sometimes students will say that their pen fails or that it's not working. And then in that case, if that is the case, you just go ahead and bring out another pen. Maybe that pen in particular needs to charge, or maybe it needs more filament. I find that giving students 2 or 3 rods of filament is best so that they're not bothering you necessarily while you're teaching. Or maybe you're going to teach them that maybe you have a 3D pen station like I do in my room where they have everything set up and they can go grab themselves if they've learned how to obtain those materials correctly. Some classes, I understand, just can't do that. Some students just can't do that. You might have your technology coordinator also pass the resources out better or more correctly, or rather not more correctly, more responsibly, so that your students learn how to behave, how to correctly dispense of the materials that you're using. Also, it gives students a reason to work harder, I think, when you teach them responsibility for tools that are not cheap and not toys to fool around with. when we talk about the 3D pens that are the Create model and the Pro model, we have to be extra careful and extra sensitive to not leaving those plugged in to where we could start a fire. The issue of the fire has not happened to me yet, so I have not seen anything like that get out of control. I've seen students get not burned, but that the filament coming out of the pen is hot, and so maybe it needs a few minutes to cool, or maybe it needs a few minutes before they can actually glue it down to the board or save it for whatever it needs to do. If that becomes an issue, I usually have another pen or another alternative assignment so that they're able to maybe work with a group with the pen, or maybe they're able to work with another friend if they can't work in a group. I also have found though that it seems to not cause more problems. It seems to cause more incentive or more of a reason to learn, which if you have a really tough class, if you have a really high needs class, or a group of students at the high school level who really need enrichment, or a group of preschoolers who need enrichment, or maybe need a different way of instructing, they are able to want to do this. So usually it's our last center, and then they have from maybe 9:30 or 9:45 to 10 o'clock to work on their 3D pen creation. And for a while, it's not a free for all. It's not a, I'm doing whatever I want with my pen. They need to show you that they're applying some form of their learning. So another example a teacher had provided was that they're studying animals of Africa. So she left it open, but with a direction. So they could bring in a library book and they could find an animal, a zebra, a lion, an animal that is in Africa. And then they had to find the animal on the map and where it lived. And they had to create, if they could, a habitat. And then their animal is created by their 3D pen. So they're working on those right now. I have yet to have pictures or take pictures of any of the animals that they've done yet, but there's some talent out there. And I'm just so inspired, I think, by our students and their abilities to be so unafraid, because I think as adults, we also are afraid to do things that might not meet standards and might not be objectives. I see that Laurel asked the question, is there a 3D pen product that I recommend the best? I do. I don't recommend the ones that are sold just flat off the internet. I totally recommend the class set if you can afford it. If you can't, I recommend the start just for the preschool level until you get really good for yourself. But if you're going to use it for your classroom and you want all students to learn from it, it could be that you just buy one and you buy that Create model, which would work. It depends on your grade level as well, Laurel, because we would want them to have one that is user friendly and is not fearful or afraid. Sometimes kids will say, my filament's stuck, it's not working, and I can't do it. But teaching them to be problem solvers instead of I guess problem creators is also an incentive. So I'm going to show you my product that sort of came out, but this is my dot, and this is my dot from my special education students lesson on geometric elements, because that in itself is teaching students a piece of it, right? They can go off their name, they can go off of anything that really inspires them. I know one teacher in 3rd grade right now who's working on lessons about inquiry. So she's starting a lesson on ladybugs and bees. So her idea is to teach students about how to use multiple forms of learning with what's available to them. So here they're, looking at the tree and they're watching the bees fly in, and you have one student who wants to know about honey and wants to know about bees. And I'm so inspired because these same students, it's beyond drawing. They can actually sit down and create an actual bee or a jar of honey if that's really where they are with it. Some teachers had asked me to share in my presentation when I presented to the staff specific lessons for different grade levels. I had 2 schools visiting for our staff meeting, so I came up with a few of their lessons that they wanted to know for their grade levels. For physics, I did mention at the high school level, atomic molecules. For elementary, we talked about spatial orientation. We also did a lesson on measurement. Students could draw and then trace over with their 3D pen if they were afraid of it. They could also first examine the pen. They could first look at it. They could design what would be best to use for whatever project they're using. I have had a 6-year-old use the Pro, which I was, wow, that's really advanced, but she was using it to design a castle because that's where her princess is going to live. So that was her from a storybook. She used that example. I don't like it when teachers or anybody in education says my students can't. So I guess with that incentive, knowing that we are capable as teachers of providing resources to our students for them to be able to demonstrate their learning, that was really neat because her parents came in and helped our class and they were showcasing what you can do. Her dad had shared with the class, this is an awesome activity for when it rains. Of course, you can design and design and design, and it's great. It keeps your brain stimulated and going. I did want to mention the idea about plugging things in. So, or the Pro needs an electric cord. You cannot take it away from the wall. Something like this does not need to be always plugged in, which makes it more useful. And it goes with the brand that I like. If you can use this, or if you can purchase these and not purchase the Pro, then I would totally do that, because then you can give one of these to every single student and they don't fight and they don't have to be next to a wall or next to a socket. So it's way easier. It is also way easier to manage in a classroom. Once they get going and once you have everything set, it's pretty cool what you see in your classroom going on. I really, really like the growth and what I'm seeing in students. I see lots of students who show different examples of where they are. Molecules I mentioned. I don't think it's just a tool for high school. I think that all grade levels and all abilities can use it. I think that if you come up with a lesson and you can find a way to make the 3D pen involved in your work, I think that we're promoting the opportunity for our students to be higher level thinkers as well as career and college readiness. I had a student this last week draw Jackie Robinson. He also added a baseball. He added a baseball bat, and then he was working on the number 42 because that's what Jackie Robinson wore. His drawing and his idea made me think about how we as teachers have to constantly build on what captivates our students as well within our curriculum. So that's 4th grade wonders. And we're talking about justice and innovative biographies and people who've done wonderful things for our world. I had students who were able to write Martin Luther King Jr.'s initials as well. So you can have the Jackie Robinson creation, but you can also have the Martin Luther King Jr. initials. We had our Hawaiian Studies Kumu come in and teach a lesson about Ha and about Hawaiian Studies. He had the students use the 3D pens to make kalo and then to write the word Ha. He also had students create different pieces of Hawaiian culture. So one of those was the Hawaiian flag. Another one was trying to draw and create the Iolani Palace. Some of that is very ambitious. Some of that is also very much easier for students to take on. And maybe that's also part of our job too, is that learning about which activities they can really do with the pen and what's possible. You will have to be able to have enough filament for bigger projects, but you can also bring it out more, and maybe more teachers will use it as well. I do have teachers who have used different pens to create different things for students to use. A student made a water bottle carrier. I don't know that it's dependable or reliable, but they made the water bottle carrier with the handle. I've had students who designed their own checkerboard game. I have others who also have designed a phone case, which is interesting. We go back to the jewelry making. I had another one who created a watch band. I had another one who created a ring. More who created bracelets. And that too, if we can look at it as a way for our students to be more, I guess, more excited about school and more willing to learn how to incorporate their own gifts with our curriculum. I think that our students have an opportunity to be able to be empowered as well with this. So, does anybody need a brain break? I should also ask before we keep going. Okay. I do, okay, I'm gonna keep going then. I do have an incentive for those of you who want to try the 3D pen as well. I had a teacher talk about specifics with STEM and what lessons they could use for STEM, that because the pen is such a mobile device, his idea was, what could I do, or what could I teach my students with the pen and with science? And he came up with, here on Maui, the Maui Ocean Center has a contest every year where they ask us to find an animal that is native to Hawaii and to build a way to protect that animal. So this teacher is now teaching how to make a model way, if I understand this correctly, a model of how to help the honu, or how to help the turtle navigate its way from the beach to the ocean with the 3D pen. And like, okay, this will be very, very exciting to view and see. But he is seeing kids who are using that same concept as the Maui gym student. You know, they're designing, they're using an engineering model with STEM. They're trying to find a way to create an environment for this honu to get from the beach back to the ocean so that it doesn't get stuck, which is really cool. I think they're really, really neat and exciting. I think too that the pen also, as I talked about, it allows for students to explore a subject without being labeled. Many of my special education students do not like being known. And we know our students all know, but they do not like being labeled as students who are special ed. They want to be just like everybody else. So if they can use the 3D pen and someone who's a traditional student can't yet, that's also leveling the playing field. They have the opportunity to be able to say and show, I am capable of learning like you. I just demonstrate it differently. I think that that is something we all have to be more compassionate and empathetic with as well. And if we think back to STEM skills, some of these skills that the 3D pen promotes are power skills. It's difficult in our world to be compassionate. It's difficult in our world to be creative. It's difficult in our world to be challenged. And yet this allows our kids and our students to try new things and to explore them without feeling threatened and without being ridiculed, being embarrassed. One of our students in class is really cute. Yesterday had shared that using the 3D pen is kind of like my mom's experience with spin class. And I kind of went, what? How does this, how does this relate? And he said, well, nobody really knows how fast or how hard my mom is spinning. Only my mom knows. And so the same could be said for the 3D pen. Nobody knows how fast or what I'm going to create, but we're all using the same pen. So very, very interesting as well, how we can approach education and how we can approach that subject. I did, as we approach 11 o'clock, I do want to make sure I point out some materials. I didn't make a slide on this, but I can always email everybody on this. I wanted to talk about the materials that you can use with the pen as well, just so you are aware and you have ideas. We made a fish in one of my classes and we used cardboard. So we used the filament, we used the pen, obviously. So we had the pen, we had our filament, we also had cardboard pieces. So I tried to go through materials that are suggested by the 3D Doodle website, but also being creative and not spending a lot of money, because I know that as teachers, we don't have a lot of money. But I will tell you, I have been a very, I don't know what the right word is, I've collected materials. So if you want materials, let me know with your address in the chat, to your work address, to either Sophie or myself towards the end of our presentation or before. And I can send you some materials that I have, because I think that I need to give you, and part of my thing is I need to give you what I've used or what's out there so that you try it, because that's part of my condition with having so many people be kind and generous to me with these devices. So I've used cardboard pieces. I've used foam boards from Home Depot, and Home Depot is really, really kind about donating resources. If they can't donate, they will talk to their manager and they will try to get you a discount. Just when you go in there, I know you can go in there and say something like, I'm a teacher and I'm wondering if you have any resources that you might be willing to share. And if you present your project to them or what you're doing, they seem to be more willing to donate. One of my high school teachers says. You can also build it with these students want to possibly work for you. One of his projects was getting his CBI class to build dog houses for the Humane Society with the 3D pen. So they were designing what their 3D model would look like eventually, but Home Depot was so gracious and so willing to say, oh gosh, like, sure, we can supply you with the actual wood and the actual paint and all of that when you get to that stage. So their 3D pen making was like their second piece of that. So once they showed that to Home Depot, they were willing to give them more. So I think that that's super cool as well. With that, filament, cardboard, foam board is great. Glue, I have found that Elmer's glue works really well. I also think though, Elmer's glue works great, but super glue is really, really helpful, but you have to watch with young kids because that glue gun gets really, really hot. If you can have a parent volunteer or you have another teacher, I'm lucky enough to have 2 other teachers that I work with because I go in and out of classrooms as a special ed teacher. They plug in their glue gun, they kind of box it off so that nobody can hurt themselves or be around it. And then when the kids are totally finished with their 3D pen project, they go back to the glue gun and they glue it so that it's secure. I've used paper towel rolls because if they need a structure or something to use the pen around, we've used old pencils We've used golf pencils. We've used golf balls for little, we had a student who made a 3D model of a shave ice. We've also used cubes, geometric cubes for students to box around. We've also used, for the glasses, we used a stencil so that the students had something to draw over. We've also used hearts. We've drawn first, we've scaffolded, and then we've added that to students. We've also allowed students at our school to be very, very creative and very helpful. We've allowed them to come in with supplies that they have, as long as they're not harmful. So they've brought in things from home. We've had paper towel rolls, toilet paper rolls, boxes, old boxes, if they think they can do that. Sometimes it's a little bit more, what's the right word, over adventurous or over ambitious, but that's also part of letting them learn, and letting them figure out what works best, because that's what architects do. That's what designers do. We have a student who wants to build a sled, so he has to draw it first, and then he's making a model of his sled so he can then show an Iditarod musher how to build his own sled. Designing, we have a student right now, super, super wonderful. We had a gentleman from the X-ray department at Kaiser come and talk to our students about his job. And he was showing students how he X-rays hands and bones and to see, and the student wants to design a cast. So the student is now making the structure of the outside of the hand to find out what bones need to be protected with the cast. Just really what might be considered out there or shoot for the moon ideas, but these are ideas that our students are very capable of. And maybe also the 3D pen promotes conversation among how we as teachers can get better, and how we as teachers can get better with what we can offer our students. So that was really neat, how the student wants to know how to protect bones with different devices. And then I find out later that the student loves to snowboard. So the idea is that he wants to protect his hands and fingers and bones so that it doesn't happen, he doesn't break a bone, which is really neat. Also, students who are fascinated with Apple Pay and want to know if there's a way that they can design a smarter Apple Pay with the pen. I've never, not sure how to or where to go with that, but I find that really, really cool. Really inspiring, like things that are just like, wow, like I just never would have thought the way that they think. Asking students to begin with two, I have other ideas from a second grade teacher who said that she started with the 3D pen with a circle map. And what technology devices are you familiar with? So asking her class to begin with what technology devices they're familiar with. So I'm sure it's the iPad or it's the computer, but also that helps her with scaffolding for what her students need. In addition to that, she asks them at the beginning of every school year, how, yes, I'm looking at, can you tilt the camera down and show how the filament comes out? Yes, I can. Yes, I can do that right now for you in just a second. She asks the students every year how they might use the pen to better the world and how they like to learn. So she puts up a chart and she takes the tally of all the different subjects. And she says every year, more often than not, with 23 students or 23 to 27 students, she has over 16 of her students share that the way that they learn best is with technology. And so she says, beyond the computer, beyond the iPad, what more is there for them to use and then learn later in life to then be like you and me? Because the reality check is, for all of us as teachers, the 3D pen wasn't around when I was a kid. And so we have to adapt. As I get older, I feel like I have to adapt to how these children learn and how they're going to learn going forward than just what I went through. And so very similar to the concept of a parent who is saying, I don't know how to do this math in the way you teach this math. Well, the same could be said for technology, but we have to try and fail maybe so that we can get better. And I don't expect anybody to be perfect with the 3D pen. That's not real. But we learn and we get better. So I'm going to show, somebody had asked, can you tilt the camera down and show how the filament comes out when you use the pen? So when you use the pen, you're going to see this device that has the filament is on the back, and then you're going to see the filament come out of the tip of the pen as it slowly is pushing itself to go. And it's going to kind of take a little bit of, or a few minutes, and students are pretty patient with how they go about waiting for it as well. And I usually keep their charger on the other side, just in case, if I know them well enough to know that they can't remember or they need help. But there's other students who don't like that, and they want to feel accomplished, and they want to feel like, hey, I can do this. I don't need your help. So I understand that too, but your filament is coming out of that. So it's totally fine if it drops and falls, but it's coming right out of the pen like that, and it's going to go onto the paper. And it's going to dry, but it's not, with this model, it's not as hot as maybe the Pro. And then sometimes you'll get like it come right up, it'll come right up out of your pen, but still it allows for them to be able to play around and work with it. And then they can move it once it dries to be able to form the shape or different ideas. Do you have students who get frustrated or give up, or is it fairly easy to use? I think that, yes, to answer your question, I have had students who get very frustrated and give up, but that's another skill we can teach them as well with this. Or I give the option. I give a technology menu. Do you want to try? That's part of their rubric. Do you want to try to do something else that's not listed in our activity? I haven't had any students say, no, I'm not going to do this. I've had students who do get frustrated, but don't give up. They still want to play with it and use it. I think that it's how we teach it or how we offer it. So I think that has a lot to do with it. That at first, my very first lesson is, okay, so this is your pen. Please try it, use it. And you have to be willing to, if you spent the money on the filament, you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to just give up on this, and I'm not going to force them to do something they can't yet. So letting them try, letting them play. I think it's kind of the equivalent of what my first grade teacher told me. It's like manipulatives. You give them like 2 or 3 days, maybe a week, maybe 2, to play with it and to see what they can create without being under the pressure of following a lesson. And then you ask them, like that one teacher suggested that I mentioned, how about you show me something you can make with it? The gentleman, the student who did the dog, he used that as a talking tool with our school counselor over the problems that he was having at home with abuse and verbal abuse. So it can be so much more than just your classroom and within your walls as well. Is it fairly easy to use? Yes, I think so, but I think that depends on the model that you purchase. I would never expect a 6-year-old student to be able to use that Pro pen. I think that's way too difficult because you have to plug it in, not because they can't do it. It's just not conducive to their learning. I think that it also depends on what you decide when you're teaching a lesson, what you decide you want them to be capable of doing with that. If you're just playing with the pen and you're just allowing them to explore it, then maybe I would say try to be a little bit kind and compassionate with what they can and can't do, because they're learning something too. It's kind of like when we all learned how to drive, or if we haven't learned how to drive yet, we're learning the blinker, we're learning the lights, we're learning our seatbelts. Students love this though. They totally love the ability to prove to you that they can make something you can't. And believe me, the projects that I've seen, I could never do that, dog. That would make me go crazy. The other thing I wanted to share is that we had a teacher last year who had earned a grant to go to Minnesota and see. The project was for her to see. They wanted her to go to Minnesota and take back the project that the Minnesota Zoo was going to give to her, to the nation, to the world. And the project was they had rescued a pack of wolves that were found by a fireman, and they were trying to design a cage, or an environment rather, a opportunity for the wolves to maintain their wildness and not be so domesticated. And I know there's controversy over zoos and all of that, but their STEM teacher, they have a STEM teacher in their zoo. Her thing was that we want you to be able to take this project back to students and see what they can design and what they can create. And a student last year has a brother who is in a wheelchair, and his whole thing was that I want my brother to be able to see these animals in a way where he's able to be mobile. So his thing was something for the animals, and something that's helpful and kind, and promoting goodness and what's the right word? Ability for the animals to thrive, but also for my brother to be able to see them like everybody else. So sure enough, he created this model with the 3D pen. He took it home, so I don't have a picture of it, but this model where he had stairs with the 3D pen, and he had a ramp so that everybody could see these wolves doing so well. But the point being is that the tools that were offered in order to create and design and prototype were not just a computer, were not just devices that would be high-end expensive, but were things that children could use and children could design, because her thinking was, as cliche as it is, they are our future. And these children are coming to the zoo. These children are coming to see these animals. So what could a child design that would work for both? And his whole notion was making sure, or his whole motivation rather, was making sure that my brother could do the same thing that I could do. And so building on that with also providing, well, what else do you need to be able to create this? So I need something where I can design, but you can see what I'm making. So it's beyond the Apple Pen, as we know. It's a way for his brother to feel the model that he was also showing. So I think that when I think about that, and I think about what a child asked for, what are the opportunities that we as adults can provide to our children to use? And what would we do if we knew that there were other things out there? So that's another example I wanted to share. The last one I wanted to share is that there's multiple articles and resources that are out there for both sides of positives and negatives, or refinements, as we should say, for the 3D pen, that talk about the cost and they talk about the uses, but it's left many educators wondering. And I think wonderings are positive. They're amazing, because if you and I sit around and wonder, we usually come up with amazing ideas and what we're capable of. So my thinking with that is, Beth Holland wrote an article about how 3D pens in the classroom go both ways. And she talks about looking at them from the perspective of really, really creative individuals, and people and children who don't do book work, and people and children who don't learn from a computer, and people and children who don't learn auditory, and don't learn from you and I writing a math problem on the blackboard. So when we think about that, and we think about the world that we live in, I become fascinated with people like Elon Musk, and I become fascinated with people like Steve Jobs, because they have promoted a new style and a new way of thinking. And if we look at that and we look at where we are as educators, it causes us to be more mindful and more productive as to what we can do as as educators and what we are capable of offering. I think that 3D pens also invite volunteers into your classroom. I think that when you have a parent or parents who are passionate as well, they want to know how to use it too. And so you have an opportunity to be super, super creative and super, super fun, and to have kids leaving your classroom every day as, this is really awesome. This is really cool what my teacher brought today. I want to like do this again. Like, I can't wait to make this. Or kids running to our maker space and saying, look what I found on the internet. Look what I can do. Did you see the stars? Did you see the constellations? Did you see what else is in the sky? You know, what could that promote? Or taking the idea from a kindergartner maybe who decides that he or she wants to be a pilot and designing a plane. And then you learn the design of, okay, what makes a plane fly? And then you can use that. Okay, let's study Wilbur and Orville Wright. Let's look at inventors. Let's look at the bicycle. Let's look at other ways to promote how we learn instead of just a book, or a worksheet. Those aren't working anymore. And we know those things, but we are often left to do it ourselves. And so I'm offering that opportunity to be able to say, hey, you know, like what can we provide? And when I say that, I need to stand behind what I'm promoting. I need to say, hey, I've tried this and I have failed too, but I know that it works for not all, but for some children. And some of my hardest children that I've worked with who need the love the most are ones who just adore this pen. It keeps them focused, as strange and as odd as it sounds. It keeps them driven. And the idea is that they continue to want to provide more towards that. So it's an incentive also to build. You can build on that as well. I wanted to begin talking about what I'm willing to offer. And I'm not sure, maybe Sophie can help me really quickly. I'm not sure how many friends are in our room.
We have 4 people total.
Okay, we have 4. So I think because we have 4, I think I can up the ante here if you're willing, if you want. And I need your grade level and I need your school address, and I need to kind of share a little piece of what happened last year so it doesn't happen again this year. Please, please, please provide me with your correct mailing address and your zip code, because if this doesn't work, the device comes back to me and then it sits in my house. So here's what I'm going to offer, because you're all coming here on a Saturday, including your Starbucks card. I need to know your grade level as well. I'm going to provide each one of you with a 3D pen and some filament, because I want you to try it out. And then my only catch to that is that I want you to be able to show it off, like show off what some of your students do. Because with that said, I want you to be able to tell me what worked and what didn't work. I think that that's how we learn as educators, and I'm a bad colleague if I don't follow up. So I would say this, do some research on the lesson that you're going to use the pen with, so that you could, if you're going to start there, so then you could have something to then, from my notes, so that you could have something to then build off of what works from your lesson. So if you're going to teach about inventors and you were teaching about Wilbur and Orville Wright, and you were going to teach about the airplane, maybe you start with the wing, or maybe you start with something that your students can get or gravitate towards before just saying, we're going to make an airplane, because that's really overwhelming for students. I also wanted to say, in regards to the question that, what do we do with students when they give up? I would say sit down next to them and use one too, and try to go over what you might use ahead of time as scaffolds to redirect, or techniques to help them continue to try. Because someday in the workplace, our students are going to have to listen to a boss that they don't like, or they're going to have to take a consequence that they don't like. And so how we all learn is I guess, hindered on who and how it's being taught. One of my colleagues had shared a very, very powerful quote that I also want to say in closing, even though we're not done yet. I just wanted to say the level of education of the person who stands at the front of that classroom is the most powerful factor of our students' learning. So when we think about that and we think about what we're teaching, we really have to work on, when we bring in a fun, fancy, cool device, we have to work on what we're going to do with that device and how that's going to promote our learning for our students. It's not just fun and fluff. We need to pair that fun and fluff with the assessment piece or the standard or something else that brings them back to what we're teaching. So that idea of grow it beyond the classroom. If it's a shave ice, then do you want to own a business someday? If it's, I love bicycles. Why? Is it pulleys and simple machines? Is it, I like checkers. You like board games. Could you design a board game with the 3D pen? Giving our students the opportunity to make those wheels turn that are not threatening, that are not, and then another idea would be to, once you get your students to have created a model or something that they're really proud of. My special ed student, who's really, really sweet, she went to the principal and asked, and she has ADHD and she's oppositional defiant. And she says, I wanted to have a 3D pen night. And I said, what does that look like to you? She says, parents and family members come to school and they look at our 3D pen gallery museum. So they come in and they see what they've created. And more often than not, what those students have created is not what a parent can create. And so it's really neat for them to show off what they have done, what they have shown, and then what that does to our students for self-worth and value. Efficacy, big, because I made a wing of an airplane. I made an apple for a patch. I'm designing a patch. I made a bicycle. I made a dog. I made a dog because I want to be a dog breeder. I made a dog because I have 7 dogs. You know, something about yourself. And when we do that, we have parents who come in and they look around. And then we also invite people from the community who are from different jobs. And they go around with a clipboard and they look at, you know, they talk to the kids as they're next to their project. So it's a bigger avenue of a science fair. You know, like it's a model of what you could do with that. Like, why did you do this? Why did you create this? What inspired you? And students can share a piece of themselves, or they can share a piece of the project. And that also gives students another reason to work harder. Are you an inventor that promotes learning? Or are you an inventor that simply just made, you know, whatever? But it's interesting to see how students respond to that community piece. I think too, like, you might be lucky and have somebody who comes into your room who says, I'd like to help you fund this further. And so you develop that as well. I think that when you create a rubric as well for their projects, they evaluate themselves and they have projects that they go, wow, like I didn't realize my peer could do that. I didn't realize that was tied to that. So I think that is really, really neat. Also for students to be able to have that piece of who they are in another learning avenue. We have so many nights on literacy night. We have nights on EL. We have nights on math, but we don't really have nights about all these new advances in technology. And we need to be better at what we know and don't know and what we recognize for student and for student growth. For assessments, really quickly, I have had teachers ask, well, how could you use this as an assessment? How could you measure student learning? And a couple ideas were, could write about what you saw, what you built, the steps, the scientific process, the engineering model. where are you in what you've created? I also have, thank you. We have 5 minutes left, guys and girls. I'm so sorry. And you can also ask students, we can build assessment off of this when they present. So if they're giving a presentation to kindergarten and maybe they're in 4th grade, they're giving a presentation to the principal. If they're giving a presentation to 4 principals and VPs, that's also an incentive. There's many ways to form that. I also wanted to leave us with please making sure that you leave me with your address, your school address. I'm sorry to be clarifying. If you would like a 3D pen, and I probably will be sending the model that works best for you, or is supposed to work best for you. Please play with it yourself first. I will say that. If you can let me know what colors you would like, I can try to make sure that you'll get an assortment, like a rainbow of different ones that work. And then I also will try to provide you with resources for that as well, and the contest that Joyce asked about. I'm so sorry, I haven't forgotten. And then let me see, what else do I need to make sure I add? Just your colors, your grade level, your address, and then you will get $5 to Starbucks as well, because you know you're going to have some fuel to do this. So if there's not any other questions, I can make sure, I'm going to give you guys time to make sure you write in your address and make sure you give me your contact info. And please, please, please follow up with me if it doesn't get delivered, because usually I get back something, and Laurel was kind enough last year to let me know when somebody didn't receive something. So please let me know if you don't get this. Give me about a week. And I'm pretty sure they're shipped by UPS. So bear with me on that and use it. Have fun. That's the whole goal. So if there's not anything else, you're welcome, Joy. Thank you so much. Thank you for sending it to my email as well. I appreciate it. And please send me pictures of your projects. I'm always curious to see, because we learn best from each other. If anybody else has anything to say or ask me.
I have some questions, but
Sure.
I will open it up to other people first if there's anything.
I think this is great presentation. I was thinking as a parent, it'd be awesome to even get like a greeting card with a 3D pen design. And in our school, all the grade levels learn Mandarin Chinese. So for them to even do like the characters in 3D Doodle pen, that would be so fun.
Absolutely. And you're promoting, what's super cool about that is you're promoting something that somebody's not going to throw away. To get a postcard like that would be so treasured, I think.
Okay, so I'll wrap up, and then Ty, I do have some questions, but I want to make
Okay.
sure we end at the 11:30
Sure.
first, and then we can continue with questions after. So mahalo to Ty and for everyone's participation. We hope that you found this session helpful and made some valuable connections. Special thanks again to our sponsors, Sacred Hearts Academy Honolulu and the Augustine Educational Foundation for making this conference free for the past 10 years. Please help us by completing the survey on the website iTeach808.com so we can continue to receive grant funding. I just put the link in the chat so you can fill that out there. You will also receive a certificate of participation after completing the survey and automatically be entered to win one of 10 $10 gift cards to Target if you complete the survey by February 4th. The survey will also be sent to the email address that you registered with. Please make sure to check the spam folder for any emails from iTeach808hawaii@gmail.com. Thank you for being here today, and feel free to join the other sessions coming up next week. Have a wonderful day. And then, Ty, I'm so inspired by this
Thanks.
presentation.
It's really fun. It's really fun. I mean, I started this whole thing just because I had a really tough group of kindergartners several years ago. And I was like, nothing is working, like nothing is working. And yet it's proof that we have to constantly advance what we're doing.
So I wanted to ask, because I just like recently bought a brand new classroom set of whiteboard markers because we
Sure.
were running low on those. And the students use the markers appropriately, but then also love to just doodle with them and color every single square on the graph. And for me as
Totally.
a teacher, I'm like, oh, this is so expensive. And you're like, wasting the ink. So I know that you had mentioned that you have a contract that your students have to sign and acknowledge in the beginning about like proper
Right.
use for that. As like a teacher in the scenario with the whiteboard markers, I don't actually address my students in that scenario because I'm like, I know that like doodling can maybe help them process information
Sure.
better, or
Sure.
I don't want to limit their creativity for things. So
Sure.
how do you, I guess kind of like, what are the things that you define in the contract, and what are things that you specifically address behavior wise, and what are things that you kind of leave open?
So I address, first of all, like I will show respect to the device. I will show respect to my peers while using this, because we have kids who get up and touch another kid or want to invite somebody to come look at the project. And I'm like, you can't be doing stuff like that when you got something that's on, right? Because it's when it's on, it's still hot and we're not taking care of something. So I address that. I also tie it to our schools. We're surfers, the Hikai surfers. So I tie it to our behavior model. And then I also tie it to their GLOs, because that's GLO number 4 in the public school. So I just say, if you can't handle using technology correctly, I'm sorry, 3 strikes, you're out. Or if you're really out of control, you have to put it back and you can go use it when you can settle down. But it's also like, for some reason, they find that really, I guess, like I want to say, when you provide more structure with something, they find that really helpful. Like they like having to be accountable. They like that. They like, and I leave it on their desk. Like I leave it saying, like, is that? Like when I'm walking around, oh, is that? Is getting up and touching your neighbor while we're doing this correct? Oh, no, it's not. And then they go back and they sit down. So I think you can make a contract. I know I've done different contracts for kindergarten versus 4th grade, but if they can't handle it, then you add that piece to their contract. I don't ever like taking something away from kids when you're trying to get them to learn. Like, just like I would never kick a child out of my classroom as bad as they are because then they missed your instruction. But I think there's that piece of like, you're going to be held accountable for what you do and don't do. And then I usually have them address why they don't use it anymore, if that ever happens. I haven't had anybody be out of control with it to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh. I had one kindergarten put filament up his nose, and I was like, no, that's not where it goes, but it wasn't a punishment, it was more so like, okay, no, like I know you're being funny, but don't do that. So I would say just tying it to like my school's behavior, but also the GLOs. Like, and then I asked the kids, do I have to call your parents really as a 4th grader, or even as a kindergartner? This one kindergarten teacher was telling my kids with the contract, like, you're 6. I can't believe you're at school and I have to call your parents. And that gets them settled down. So I think it just depends on how the class dynamic is too. But yeah, I get your whiteboard problem. That would drive me crazy.
Thank you so much, Ty. We're so
Thank
honored.
you.
Your
Thank
school is so lucky to have you. You have so
Oh,
many
thanks.
and
Thank you.
I love your passion that you bring to the table. And yeah, I love how you really are thoughtfully implement these 3D pen activities for your students. That's super cool.
I think it's hard to, at certain times, to pick a technology device and really make sure that we all know as educators, but really make sure that what you bring into the classroom is not just fun or fluff, like what you're putting on a classroom wall. It has to be, and I'm learning this with national boards once again, that you have to be really mindful of what you hang on your walls. Is it just a cute caterpillar, or is it teaching a standard? Is it a device that you're going to use because you're going to play games, or are you going to play a learning game, or are you going to do something that I don't like asking kids anymore? I've learned, what do you want to be when you grow up? I like asking them, what problem are you going to solve? Because it's too, as I've learned, it's too watered down. It's too bare minimum, because we're not in that world anymore. And maybe the pandemic taught us that. I'm not sure. I just know that it's hard for me as an educator when we see bare minimum, and that's why I love iTeach, because we have that
Aw.
opportunity. It's like there's so much good out there.
I love that. Instead of asking like, what are you learning? Ask like, what problems are you going to solve? That's definitely the future and the goal of
Totally.
education. Thank you so much for
Okay,
your time.
no
Sophie,
worries.
you too. Saturday mornings, you
know.
guys are just so awesome, amazing, and we're so honored because you're neighbor island too. I mean, this
Yeah.
wouldn't have been possible without the Zoom. So we're
Yeah.
so honored to have you. Thank you for lending your voice and your experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, too.
Okay.
You're so wonderful. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Ty.
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.